Hello and welcome to 18-Minute Leaders, JI's new series on insights into parenting, education and success with leaders of today and tomorrow. And today is actually Thanksgiving, so I am giving thanks today to be here with the amazing Michal Oshman, who is a head of company culture, diversity and inclusion and employer branding of TikTok Europe, Middle East and Africa, and was formerly responsible for international leadership and team development at Facebook. Throughout her career, she has trained and coached thousands of leaders and has 3 university degrees in psychodynamic and systemic thinking, sociology, and anthropology. Don't know how she had time to get 3 degrees as well as do all of that. Michal lives with her husband and their 4 children in London. So we are not celebrating Thanksgiving today, but we're saying hi to everyone who is across the pond. And I also wanted to show that in her spare time, Michal has also just written this amazing book, which I have on my bedside table at the moment and have been reading. What would you do if you weren't afraid? And we'll come to that soon. So welcome, Michal.
Thank you, Hannah. Thank you for the warm welcome and happy Thanksgiving for everyone celebrating today.
So, Michal, please tell us a bit about you and your journey and also your Jewish journey.
Yeah, so I discovered in many ways Judaism or the Jewish wisdom, as I write about it in the book, later in life, around the age of 38, which was about 8 years ago. I grew up in Israel, in Tel Aviv. I was very clear about my identity as being Jewish. But in our home, there wasn't much connection to Judaism from a meaningful point of view. It was very clear that we celebrate the holidays. And obviously, when you live in Israel, it's just all around, right? When there's Yom Kippur, there's no cars. When there's holidays, there's always time off at school, from school. But I didn't connect to a deep meaning, the deep meaning that the Jewish wisdom can offer. I was brought up in the 70s by my parents, but also my grandparents who were Holocaust survivors. My grandmother, Hannah, survived as well as all my grandparents. She actually jumped off the train on the way to Auschwitz. She sensed that something very bad was going to happen, and she was brave and also lucky enough to be able to squeeze herself off the train. She got injured, but she saved herself. But of course, you know, Holocaust and what she had seen and experienced, which is losing most of her family, stayed very much within who she was. And she shared with me the Shoah, the Holocaust stories from a very young age. And I developed a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety around how something like this could happen. I also grew up in a home that my father had a key position in Israel. He was the head for a forensic pathologist for about 20 years, and during a time of terror and difficult years. And I was exposed to death from a very young age, and that affected me. I grew up to be a very anxious, scared girl, but a girl that would never say anything about that. I wanted to please my parents. I wanted to please my grandparents. I wanted to be perfect. I continued to serve in the military. I was an officer in the Israeli Defense Forces. And around early 20s, I realized I couldn't do this anymore. I couldn't pretend that everything was perfect and pleasing everyone when inside I was so afraid. For many, many years, I went to therapy. I went to psychotherapy. I took medication. And when I was already a mother of 3 children and married and had so much to celebrate, including all those things that you mentioned very kindly in the beginning, but inside I was a very anxious woman and I found it really hard to live. And at that point, when I was looking everywhere, but not in my heritage or in my, I guess, part of my identity, it was at that moment when I discovered, and I share in detail how it happened, I discovered the essence of the Jewish wisdom, which is Jewish, but also universal. And that's what I share in the book. I share practical ideas of how to overcome anxiety and fear and jealousy and how to deal with those experiences through the lens and the deep ideas of the Jewish wisdom.
It's so fascinating because, you know, you are from the outside portray someone who's so together and successful and beautiful, and everyone's looking like you've got it all. And I think that's very much replicated at the moment in terms of social media and these perfect lives that everyone has, and that yet you're saying that inside you felt something so different. And I think a lot of people can relate to that, and it's very powerful to know that someone who has had so much success and yet experienced all that anxiety and how you overcame that. It would be really interesting to share with people maybe something from the book about how you sort of turned to Judaism and Jewish teachings to relieve some of that anxiety and help you, achieve that sense of calm. So
absolutely. And Hannah, what you're saying is really important. Like, we never know what's going on in a person's heart and life. Sometimes people themselves don't know what's going on for them. So let alone, so often people would judge or make decisions of like how things look like from the outside. Sometimes it's what your LinkedIn is saying. Sometimes it's the car that you're driving. Sometimes it's like what your relationship looks like. But as you said, we never know what's going inside. And I care deeply to sharing that message, with the parents on the call now, with people, with teachers, with educators, with humans, that we always need to be very empathetic and sensitive to like what's the story, what's the baggage that the other person is carrying, even if we can't see it. I think the first main discovery that I made, as I said, in a bit of more advanced stage in life, is that I have a soul. And that you have a soul, and everyone watching has a soul. And for many years, I felt damaged because of the things that I had seen or experienced, or things that were done to me, and I didn't feel good enough. My book is called "What Would You Do If You Weren't Afraid?" And that fear is not, it's not on the survival fear that many of us have felt during COVID, right? Like, we had to be afraid to be able to stay safe and to keep each other safe. What I'm talking about is more the anxiety, the fear of what if. What if I'm not smart enough? What if I'm not successful enough? What if I make a decision and it's going to be a huge failure? And I think often those things stop us from taking action. And sometimes it stops us from owning and doing and living fully. And what I learned about the Jewish wisdom is that you have a soul. You have a godly soul. And regardless of what happened to you in life, that soul is as pure and as special and undamaged as it was in the beginning. And the other thing that I learned is that Jewish wisdom encourages people, Jews, non-Jews, anyone that wants to grow, to take action, to take a step forward, to live life. I also discovered that this obsession that I developed with perfectionism, it's actually a very non-Jewish wisdom way to live. Like, we weren't wired to be perfect. We were actually wired to have good and bad within us. And the important thing is to be aware that we're wired that way, and to be able to work on it internally, right? Call it bad inclination, call it, I don't like these guys. Sometimes it doesn't translate well from Hebrew, but the idea is that you'll always have that side of you that you're struggling with. Call it ego. So it's a lot about the mindset, how things that really made me almost depressed before, suddenly they're giving me energy, because I know that this struggle is a vehicle for growth, that it was actually supposed to be this way. And this mindset allowed me to let go of wanting to be perfect as a mom, as a wife, as a leader at work. It allowed me to feel more comfortable in my skin, literally my own skin, how I feel in my body. And it gave me a lot of hope to know that that life was never supposed to be this easy sail, and the only way to grow is often to struggle a bit, and it's a different mindset.
That's so powerful. It's really, really, I mean, we're all here trying to be these perfect people. And actually, the whole idea of, all of these role models, even in the Torah, and how they were imperfect, and actually really focuses on their imperfections is just, it's really powerful. I read your book, and I noticed that you really embodied this phrase, crossing the narrow bridge. It's actually a very famous song, Gesher Tzar. It's something that I really live my life by. And I wanted to ask you, I think that in everybody's lives, you come through two decision points where you have to make these hard decisions, or even just how you parent, or which school you're going to send your kids to. All of these decision making processes, you were saying in your book, kind of filled you with this anxiety. And how do you, if you wanted to give a message today to people who are trying to make small or big decisions in their lives and are about to cross this bridge, what would you say to them to help them, make those decisions and take those next steps?
Well, I love how you described the song that I think, many of us probably heard before about Gesher Tzar Me'od. So in Hebrew, Kol ha'olam kulo Gesher Tzar Me'od, Ha'ikar lo lefachad klal. So the whole entire world is a very narrow bridge, and the main thing is to have no fear at all. Now, of course, we have fear, but the question is, what are we going to do with our fear? And really the encouragement is, and that's the kind of Jewish way of survival, is to try and overcome your fear. Don't take unnecessary risk, but take action. And behind me I have the quote from Albert Einstein, which is, if you change nothing, nothing will change. And every chapter in the book ends with a practical coaching session, let's say, between myself and the reader, under that title of, if you change nothing, nothing will change. So the idea of the bridge is, if you want to meet a life partner, you probably need to start going dating. If you want to make a career change and do something different, you should probably start exploring what are the things that are your passions, like what are your talents, what do you love doing. If you're in an unhealthy relationship, you should probably consider, how can you either trying to improve that relationship or get out of it. So the idea is that life is full of bridges. And bridges include decisions. And it doesn't have to be a scary bridge. It could also be, a good in front of your face bridge. And sometimes you don't know exactly how you're going to get to the other side. But what matters, and you said it before, Chana, is taking one step. One step at a time. If you want to start a new parenting approach, if you want to correct a relationship that hasn't been working, take that one step. Sometimes that step means that you're putting your ego aside. Sometimes that step means that you're practicing a new behavior. But if you know that that other side of the bridge is where you belong, maybe it's worth taking that step forward.
For sure. I mean, we're just coming out of COVID, and I feel like that's definitely affected people's ability to take those steps confidence-wise. And people have also, I think, taken on new things as a result of COVID as well, and reflected on their lives, possibly in a way that we never imagined before we'd experienced all these lockdowns. So I think that message is profound from that aspect as well. About, I think that we've taken lessons from this, and we're trying to implement that in our lives. And it's about taking those small steps rather than, obviously we have an end vision in sight, but in order to make that happen, you can do it incrementally, and that's very powerful. I also think that I want to come back to what you were saying about the outside, and it just resonated with me because as a child, one of my key phrases that I grew up with was never judge someone. Never judge a book by its cover. And I just wanted to revisit that before we have our final bit, about how important it is to not judge people from the outside. And I'm sure that you've experienced that a lot because of who you are and where you work and what you stand for. I mean, how do you manage that, being in the role that you are, being a woman, being a very public figure? It must be difficult to sort of live up to these expectations all the time. And, I'd just like to explore a bit about how you manage that on a daily basis as well.
I think it's a very powerful question, and I totally understand where you're coming from. I think that as someone that looked for solutions outside of themselves and realized that many or all of the answers were inside of me, it encouraged me to really, when it comes to finding joy and growth, look inside. And when I mean look inside, I mean within myself, within my family unit, within my community. So my mission in life is to normalize the imperfect side of us, in every way, shape, or form. I share very openly with my children my mental health situation in certain times of my life. I share with them that I was lost in myself. I shared dark thoughts that I have, and my encouragement to them is, whatever thought you have, share it with me. Immediately when you share it, it's going to be sounding less scary, and less overwhelming. So I think the more we look inside, we kind of lose a bit of interest of how we look like, let's say our external persona or our external brand. And if we feel comfortable inside, those things will matter a bit less. But I also live within, my day-to-day. I still care about what I look like. But it's about having healthy perspective and priorities. And as a parent, and I think as educators, one of our roles is to really help young people find themselves.
Wow. The fact that you're saying you share your mental health issues with your kids, I haven't heard that a lot, and that's really something that I'm going to take away, because I think by exposing yourself and your imperfections, that's a great role model for your kids as well. So it's really powerful. We, believe it or not, we're running. But just to finish, we're asking everyone to have like a tweet takeaway. Like, what's a key tweet or key phrase that you live your life by? If we could put that into a tweet, what would it say?
Yeah, so I do very much like the idea of taking ownership on your life, and if you change nothing will change. It's definitely a motto for me. And I think it's nice to connect it to Thanksgiving and Hanukkah that's coming up next week, in a few days. Which, if we want great things to happen to us and we want to grow, we need to help ourselves a bit. And sometimes it's a very small change that can take us a very long way. So yeah, taking action and living fully is something I truly believe in.
Well, that's an amazing way to end this 18 minutes. Thank you so much for joining us today. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone, and happy Hanukkah. And we will see you in our next 18-minute leaders very soon. Thank you, Michal, for joining us.
Thank you, Hannah. It was great having this conversation today.